Hi, my name is Victor. I am the head of models at Gauntlet. I worked on building Aera for about 2 years. And for those of you who might not have heard of Aera, like we have a white paper that's like longer than a Cheesecake Factory menu. And for those of you who haven't, I'll explain what Aera is, where Aera has gone, is like here today and where we want it to go in the future. So Aera was originally formed as a collaboration between Gauntlet and Nautilus. Gauntlet is a company that does quantitative research in DeFi economics, and Nautilus builds robust smart contract security systems. Aera currently is focused on DAO treasury management. How I'd frame the problem right now is there are thousands of DAOs and billions of funds. There's large concentrations of governance tokens with not a lot of exit liquidity. And as such, on top of that, DAOs tend to have pretty high on-chain coordination costs. So there's a diverse array of concerns such as paying contributors, maintaining reserves in the event of a downturn, bootstrapping liquidity. So there's definitely demand for like a one-stop shop solution for treasury management. And what Aera does is I claim that it solves the treasury management trilemma where it's trustless, principal, responsive. You have a protocol that gives you a reasonable set of financial actions in a continuous feedback loop in like a non-trust me bro sort of on-chain execution way. Aera facilitates this by having a simple yet robust architecture. Effectively, there will be vault owners that are like a DAO governance contract or a multi-sig that will deposit funds into an Aera vault along with providing an objective function that they want to achieve with their funds. There will be effectively what we term guardians, which are effectively individuals or professionals that will recommend parameters that will optimize for this said objective function in return for some reward. And this whole setup is effectively constrained by the smart contract where you're only allowed to interact with approved applications. I think this is a treasury management solution that's trusted by a number of parties in the space, such as Compound, OpenZeppelin, Moonwell, Gauntlet, and Aera. So yeah, in particular, Gauntlet and Aera have both put their funds into this product, so we definitely believe that it works. I'd say that Aera offers constrained sophistication. Sophistication comes from the fact that you have off-chain intelligence that provides like rebalance cost equations like this, and also the constraints that make sure that this whitelisted guardian is still not able to take certain actions, such as changing the rebalance cost limit or interacting with non-approved contracts. So Aera provides a couple different types of strategies. One is volatility targeting, which effectively is just constraining the realized volatility. On the left here, you'll see an example of this in sort of a simulated environment. On the right, you'll see an example of how we actually did this for Compound, where we were able to move their realized volatility to like a target level, I think, determined by DAO governance of, I think, 15% over the period of a few months. Another space strategy that Aera provides is portfolio rotations. So from way back in the day, OG Compound V2 had a bunch of ZRX and BAT. On the right here, you can kind of see an example of us rotating out of these highly liquid on-chain assets through various execution strategies that we employed. Another thing that Aera also provides is yield generation. So this is, I think, a screenshot from when we spun up a vault for the Threshold protocol and helped them get out of their illiquid T governance tokens into specifically yield-bearing assets, such as the wrapped Aave yielding token on balancer pools along with wrapped staked ETH. Aera also provides leveraged recursive staking strategies. It's just a sort of function of interplay between like the vault owner and what actually objective function that they want to achieve. As a final note, Aera also helps streamline grants in terms of like paying contributors. This is an example of workflow that we did with OpenZeppelin, where we helped them pay their contributors in the form of USDC rather than like the comp that they were receiving from various Stabler streams. So that's roughly where Aera is today, but we're here at a derivatives conference. So I want to sort of get towards give some shout outs to DeFi derivatives that I find particularly compelling that we're excited to work with in the future. One is Hyperliquid. I'd say that one part of Hyperliquid's design that is particularly appealing to me isn't just like all the various bells and whistles that they have, but in particular their focus on optimizing for volume that I'd say is beneficial for both parties of the trade. In particular, they decided to add in a design feature that I think does not exist at all in TradFi, where they've made it much more maker-friendly, and I'd say the phenomenon is like HFT taker flow tends to be toxic. This causes makers to quote wider, and the retail end user is the one that ends up bearing the cost for this. So by incentivizing volume in this way, I think that actually like provides a better path forward for like innovations that I think are actually additive among like the sort of institutional designs of exchanges in TradFi today. Another is Ethos, which is a relatively unknown like two-sided options market maker. One thing that they sort of put together is effectively, I think they term it like anti-liquidity. So if you look at this curve, it kind of looks like a dual of SOP v3, which as Guillaume has pointed out many times before is just short gamma. This actually provides like the bid side of an option centralized limited order book, and it's like one of those types of convexity premiums that we're particularly excited about. And I'd say that for Aera, we're particularly interested or invested in the growth of like an options marketplace in DeFi, far beyond Deribit, much closer to TradFi. Two potential use cases are covered calls and also crash protection. I think with regards to crash protection, perpetual options are nice, and that's nice not to have to rebalance all the time. But and I think people have already addressed all the issues with like margin and like collateral and like the lack of an OCC. But I'd say the best payouts from a user perspective here are like instantaneous rather than like a streaming kind of payout that converges to something that's like Black-Scholes like. So you can really capture the large asymmetric game with like the IV jump, especially for things closer to expiry. And you can kind of see this from like the trends with zero-day SPX and TradFi, where like having very tight expressive markets from around the vol surface from firms like Citadel, Optiver, Jane Street, Susquehanna are actually like very, very beneficial for unlocking lots of different types of these growth potential. So one other thing I want to briefly touch upon is decentralization. Aera is very committed to the decentralization roadmap, but I'll definitely say that I term this decentralization blues because this is a relatively hard problem, and I can go on for hours about like all the different struggles. I'm going to touch upon two here. One is submission aggregation. When you think of a portfolio, you can also think of it as like a vector of weights. And I'd say that robust aggregation for collections of these vector of weights can be tricky, especially when like the utility surface you're evaluating over isn't concave. A naive example could be like, let's say the barbell strategy is the correct thing to do. If you have a bunch of people who are recommending like a hyper-conservative strategy and a bunch of people who are recommending a hyper-aggressive strategy, any sort of like averaging or medianing in the middle might actually be worse than just picking one from either side. The last point here is on moral hazard. I think we're all pretty familiar with like picking up pennies in front of the steamrollers type strategies, but in DeFi they're often subject to things like Oracle manipulation or MEV. So evaluating the window, like strategies over a certain window, can be difficult when this time to convergence can be super high, and your low realized variance can basically hide compositional tail risks that you're not going to hit for a long time. Two ways to kind of address this. One, for the former, probabilistic selection, aggregation, post-clustering. You segment this high-dimensional space with no concavity guarantees into much smoother regions, and then you can like probabilistically choose within these clusters and then average within. I think on the moral hazard side, something that amounts to like insurance for tail coverage, where like you can still pay out these outsized returns to various portfolio submitters, but effectively you force them to in exchange give you a derivative that pays out in tail scenarios, which I think bounds overall leverage and these compositional tail risks. And this kind of does remind me of clawback clauses from trader bonuses in TradFi. So sort of wrapping this up, where Aera wants to go in the future, we see this as like a platform for on-chain fund management with decentralized intelligence, with verticals in like risk management, where we directly hedge protocol liabilities, ensure solvency and tail events, growth optimization, where you can disperse DAO incentives to optimize according to an on-chain objective function, or like yield aggregation, which is like a competitive marketplace for forecasting yield allocations. And finally, like this is the point of a roadmap here, where currently we're like a multi-strategy offering for DAO treasury management. Hopefully by the end of this year, we've onboarded more guardians, added new derivative strategies. By next year, maybe something that's more multi-objective along the lines of risk management, insurance, or incentive optimization. And far off in the future, when we've like hit the singularity, this will have like a bunch of robust incentive-aligned mechanisms for arbitrary objective function optimization and on-chain execution. Effectively, SciPy optimize on the blockchain. So upwards and onwards. That's all I have today. Thanks.